I will now yield to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Young, for the purpose of an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Eugene R. Tempel is the founding dean of the School of Philanthropy at Indiana University, which is happily nestled in Indiana's 9th Congressional District. He's also President Emeritus of IU's Foundation. At the IU School of Philanthropy, Dr. Tempel is leading the planning and organization of the world's first school dedicated to the study and teaching of philanthropy. He's a nationally known expert on philanthropy in the nonprofit sector and former executive director of the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University. Dr. Tempel, as a fellow Hoosier and on behalf of the committee, I'd like to express my gratitude for your presence here today, and I thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Young. And Mr. Tempel, welcome. You're recognized for 5 minutes. If you could speak directly into the microphone and turn it on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Levin, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I am the founding dean of the Indiana University School of Philanthropy, formerly known as the Center on Philanthropy at Indiana University, founded in 1987. The school's researchers are among the most respected sources of objective research on U.S. charitable giving and the factors that influence it. Their research is the basis for my testimony today. Charitable giving has been a cornerstone of American society since before our nation was founded. The Massachusetts Bay Colony led one of the first formal fundraising drives in 1641. Giving is an important way citizens exercise democracy. Each year, 65% of Americans give to charity, higher than the percent of people who vote. Giving is a tremendous force in our society. An estimated $298 billion was given to charities in 2011, according to our research. 73% of that came from living individuals. Because of charitable giving's enormous scope and impact, I urge you to investigate carefully the various effects tax policy can have on giving before deciding whether and how to change policies in ways that may have significant positive or negative consequences for the nation's more than 1 million charities and the people they serve. Federal tax policies have a significant impact. Our research shows that the cost of giving, the amount it actually costs taxpayers to make a gift after taxes, affects how much they contribute and the timing of their contributions. Our research and research by colleagues elsewhere has looked at how various federal tax policy changes impact charity. Raising marginal tax rates reduces the amount of after-tax income available for giving, but lowers the cost of giving by increasing the value of the tax deduction. Raising taxes alone without other policy changes that affect giving is usually a net positive for giving. Capping or eliminating the charitable deduction negatively affects giving. It reduces households' incentives to give to charity or to give as much as they might have. If rates increase and the charitable deduction is capped or reduced, this would produce a double whammy for giving because it both reduces after-tax income and increases the cost of giving. Reducing incentives for giving is especially likely to affect giving by higher income households, which account for a disproportionate share of U.S. household giving. IRS data show that the top 10% of income earners at $100,000 or more gave almost 2/3 of all itemized contributions in 2009. The top 1% gave 37%. Many charities rely on gifts of $100,000, $500,000, or $1 million, the gifts most affected by the combination of raising taxes and reducing or eliminating the charitable deduction. That would have a detrimental impact on the services charities provide. Our study of gifts of $1 million or more shows that more than a third of the total dollar amounts of these gifts were given to foundations. Just under a third went to higher education. The next highest totals went to health care and the arts. In our 2012 survey, wealthy donors were almost evenly divided on whether or not they would decrease their giving if the charitable deduction were eliminated. The School of Philanthropy analyzed the Obama administration's 2011 budget proposals to raise rates and reduce the charitable deduction for higher income taxpayers. We estimated that if both proposals had been enacted, total itemized household giving would have fallen by 1% in total, and giving by the higher income households specifically affected would have fallen by 2.4%. These decreases may not seem huge in total, but they could have a greater impact for individual charities, especially in the context of other factors impacting charitable giving. Our extensive research demonstrates that charitable giving is closely tied to the economy. Charities are still striving to recover from the Great Recession. Giving has dropped by more than 15% in 2008 and 2009 combined after adjusting for inflation. Giving began to grow again in 2010 and 2011, but it is relatively slow in growth, reflecting the country's slow economy. If donations were to continue to grow at the post-recession average pace of 1.8%, it could take over 5 years for charitable giving to return to 2007 levels. Finally, the health of the economy, or the health of philanthropy, depends on the health of the economy. Finding ways to address the nation's economic challenges without curbing the growth of charitable giving will ensure the continuity of services upon which our fellow citizens depend. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Young is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Tempel, earlier in your testimony, you, I think very helpfully and pointedly indicated that there's a direct correlation, very tight relationship between the state of the economy and the incidence and amount of charitable giving. You specifically identified sort of two metrics to look at, which is household income and the S&P rate in any given moment to determine what sort of charitable giving one might expect in the economy. So it's important from my perspective that we implement tax policy as we're embarking on comprehensive tax reform here that will grow household incomes in particular. I found it notable in your statement, Doctor, that higher income households provide a disproportionate share of giving. And you said you did a study in 2012 that examined giving by higher income households. What else can you tell us about giving by these households based on your study, sir?
Congressman Young, this is why the task you have ahead of you is so complicated, because there's so many different factors that work in different ways on charitable giving. But you know, high income households, those incomes with incomes of $200,000 or more, $1 million in net worth excluding their homes, do give a disproportionate share of philanthropy. And as you look at that and study that, they give about 9%, actually about 9% of their household income, so compared to 2% generally. About 95% of them give, and as I said earlier, interestingly, 80% of them give to higher education. You would expect that, but 79% of them give to basic needs organizations. You know, as illustrated by Mr. Gallagher's point, that he has $1 million and $10,000 donors. So those are the donors that will be impacted by any kinds of price sensitivity. So I think that's worth looking at. The other thing is we asked them for the first time 3 years ago. We do this study every 2 years. We asked them 3 years ago if they would increase, keep the same, or decrease their giving if the tax deduction were eliminated, and we use the phrase eliminated. And interestingly, about half of them said they would keep their giving the same, but about half of them said they would decrease their giving. And that percentage got worse as the economy got worse and as we got closer to these discussions. So we know that even, you know, that they're sensitive to those things.
Thank you. What impact did the recession have on charitable giving, and how generally, can you tell me, are charities doing right now?
Well, in the aggregate, charitable giving went down by 15% over a 2-year period, 2009 and 2010. And there's been some recovery, but the last 2 years have recovered at an average rate of 1.8%. And so, you know, going back to the earlier question I had, if you think about the slow growth of philanthropy now, and you did something, you know, the economy will help philanthropy grow, there's no question about it, but if you do anything to dampen philanthropy now, it will simply prolong the length of time it takes to come out. The other thing is that not all charities, not all philanthropic organizations are hit the same by this downturn. There was, in fact, in 2009, an increase in giving to basic needs or human service organizations, But after that, after 2009, that kind of evaporated. So people turned their attention back away from that. So you can see these kinds of things inside the economy.
Which leads me to my final question. You and other panelists have indicated concern, understandably, I think, about the financial consequences of changing tax policy with respect to charitable giving. Doctor, are there other perhaps intangible or unforeseen consequences that you can conceive of and that this panel should consider as we look to reform the overall tax code?
Yeah, just for the record, I did not come to argue in any direction, but just to point out how complex this issue is you're dealing with from the data we have. I would echo some other comments here that, you know, one of the intangibles here is that this is the way people get involved. They get engaged in their communities this way. They give this way. They volunteer this way. You know, and those things are all beneficial. But we have some emerging research that shows that when people give and volunteer, they have better health outcomes. And those could have huge public policy implications if we don't encourage this kind of activity.